Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm the inaugural Women in Politics intern at Cumberland Strategies, and today I'm joined by our guest, Kate Graham. Kate Graham currently teaches, studies, and writes about politics at Western University and its affiliate colleges. She is a fellow at the Center of Urban Policy and Local Governance at Western and is working to strengthen the leadership of Canada's communities. Kate was a candidate in the 2018 provincial election in the riding of London North Centre. Kate also ran to be leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. In addition, Kate is widely recognized as a thought leader in women's political participation in Canada. As part of her work as a Canada 2020 Fellow, Kate developed, hosted, and produced a podcast called No Second Chances, where she interviewed every female prime minister and premier that has served in Canada. Kate has recently transcribed the lessons learned from her podcast into a children's book titled Govern Like a Girl. I'm so happy you're here, and I absolutely loved your podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to it when I was working on the Hill, and I found it very relevant.
Oh, that's good. Well, thank you. And thanks for the invitation and congrats on your role. This is a really cool position that you're in. And
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. So to start, I was wondering if you could tell me about what sparked your interest in politics, what motivated you to run for office, and for the Ontario Liberal leadership race.
Sure. So it started for me about 4 years ago. I was working as a public servant. I was a director at the City of London, responsible for culture, economic development, and government relations. And it was really in the government relations role um, where this began. So I had been pushing for a few things that the City of London really needed. One was about transit funding. We're the largest city in the country without a rapid transit system. And the second was about mental health supports. We had at the time the second highest injection drug use rates in the country after Vancouver. And so I'd been working with my MPP at the time, Deb Matthews, on these and other issues for a long time. And she announced that she wasn't running and she suggested that I should run. And like a lot of women, my immediate answer was no. I love my job. I love what I'm doing. I'm not sure I'm somebody who wants to be in the spotlight in that way. And she really pushed it to me and said, you say you care about these issues. You need to think about what are you prepared to do if you want to see things like transit funding and mental health support happen. How far are you prepared to go? And so that was a tough question for me. I sat with it for a bit and then decided that, I do want to see women in politics. I do want to see governments who are interested in investing in things that I think matter. I knew the party was not doing well in the polls and I wanted to stand up for those things. And so, yeah, I did something that a lot of people thought I was totally bonkers to do at the time. I quit my job that I loved and I announced that I was going to seek the nomination. And it began what has, I guess, been for 4 years now, just this amazing adventure that I've learned more about politics than I think I ever expected by being able to engage, knocking on thousands of doors and running for leader later on and so on. I know we'll get there, but it's been an amazing experience and certainly has made me a better and more well-rounded human being by virtue of doing so. So even though I didn't win and I ran for leader and I also didn't win, I still I feel like I found lots of opportunities to be able to contribute, and I'm really glad that I took the leap.
Well, I mean, it's phenomenal that you did put your name in, and I know a lot of people are super hesitant about doing that, not only when parties are down in the polls, but just in general. It's such a big leap, and to take a big risk, losing a job you love for a job you may love even more.
Yeah.
And it's just about serving your community. So when you ran in 2018, you said you knocked on thousands of doors. Do you think you were treated differently than your male opponents if you ran against any?
I did. So it was, a mostly male race, as is often the case. And there were definitely some experiences of like overt sexism. I was out with it was an all female canvassing group of volunteers. and we had someone slam a door in our face saying, "We don't vote for women here," for example. Like, that actually happened in London, Ontario in 2018, which is hard to believe. But those moments were few and far between. And when it did happen, it provided an opportunity to spark discussion. That ended up generating some media stories. We tweeted about it. It was a chance for all of the candidates to come together and across parties and say that we need to see more women in our political system and so on. So there were few kind of overt sexism. I would say the much more influential and important barriers are those that are less visible, and they're more about how female candidates feel about themselves and how people feel about female candidates. So, we can talk lots about why we don't see as many women stepping forward. Sometimes it is because of pressures that they face at home or at work. Sometimes it's because of financial barriers. Sometimes it's because of confidence and that sense of imposter syndrome. And that was definitely something that was a very real force for me, is, feeling like, I have a PhD in political science. I'd worked in government for 10 years, but still felt like I didn't know enough. I can remember how totally nervous I was when I went to knock on that first door. I was totally convinced that someone would ask me, a really detailed question about energy policy or something, and I wouldn't know all the answers yet. And of course, that A, very rarely happened, and B, people are not expecting political candidates to know everything. But I think women often feel that sense that, I'm not ready, or I'm not experienced enough, or I'm not equipped enough to do this. And so that was definitely a barrier that I experienced and still do to an extent. And then in terms of the perceptions of female candidates, I definitely got questions about whether or not I was qualified to a frequency and level that I don't believe that male candidates get. This was more true when I ran for leader. Again, I would have many, many people ask me whether I was qualified. And my partner he's a male in politics. He's a city councillor. He's never been asked that question, and I was asked it constantly. So I think there are differences in how people perceive female candidates and how female candidates are socialized to see themselves that can be more important and difficult barriers to overcome than those, people who still overtly express sexist views. Luckily, my experience has been that those are few and far between.
Well, I'm happy to hear that some of that's changing now for the discourse of women entering politics, but as you mentioned, there still are some of those invisible barriers. And what do you think we can do as a society, or even like us working at Cumberland, to help smash some of those invisible barriers?
Mhm. I think I've been thinking lots about this. You mentioned the introduction about I have a children's book about women in
Mhm.
politics coming out later on this year. And I think a big part of it is about changing our perceptions about what it means to be a political leader. So throughout Canada's history, we've had now more than 330 people serve in our top roles, and almost all of them have been older, white, straight, affluent men. Almost all of them. And so anyone that doesn't fit into that mold, anyone who's sort of not the prototype, faces barriers. And it's because we continue to see that, leadership looks a certain way, and it shapes our expectations about the people who don't fit there. So I increasingly am of the view that it means that we need to not only have a greater diversity of leaders be rising up through these systems, and we can all do things to support that by showing up and supporting candidates who reflect diversity in some form, by being those candidates and being willing to run. But we can also do that by making sure that the examples of leaders that we are showcasing aren't always so similar. So, writing books about female leaders, or having panels where we just really intentionally make sure that there's always cultural diversity included. Things like that, I think, are more important than we may know, because the underlying message when we see leadership look like many different kinds of people, when we see leadership look like Canada, is it sends a message to more people that they have a place and that leadership is a potential path for them. And I think those messages are set in very young in our life. We need kids today who are of all genders, of all cultures, to believe that, they can be the prime minister one day if they want to, they can be the premier. We need them to know that. And part of sending that message is making sure that they see a greater diversity of people in leadership roles.
Well, yeah, that's definitely extremely important. And I know we're trying to practice that here at Cumberland as well. Well, through our Women in Politics program, by making sure we're highlighting women who have served in politics or interested in it, and trying to get people from a wide range of cultural backgrounds. And hopefully that will change the discourse. And we're just one small part of it. It's not going to change with just one person. We need a whole community working together on that.
Yeah, well said.
So when you're diving into your book about Govern Like a Girl, and after conducting your podcast, No Second Chances, what did you learn about how women govern differently than male politicians? Do you think there's a difference?
I think that is the question. So in terms of the project that I did, so I focused on the 12 at the time, now 13 women who have risen to our first minister positions. And the children's book emerged from the observation that in each of these women's stories about their childhoods and their upbringing, they were all interested as young girls in making change in the world around them. So, Eva Ariak, I love this story. She believed that her community needed more recreational opportunities. They lived right on Arctic Bay. She went to the town council and asked them to take the Zamboni out onto the bay and clear it so that they could play hockey and have figure skating and so on. And the council said no, but the person who
Did they
drove
do that? It sounds like so much fun.
Yes, yeah. Well, and the person who drove the Zamboni, he heard about this and connected with Eva, and he just went out and did it anyway. And so, the community got access to that because she had pushed for it. People often talk about the story about Kathleen Wynne, where there was a rule that girls had to wear skirts. She and a group of her friends protested against that. They refused. They got kicked out. They came back with notes from their mothers, and eventually they were so disruptive that the rule got changed, and girls could wear whatever they want, which they should be able to do. So Govern Like a Girl is really about you don't need to wait until you have that position of power or that title. It's about believing that you can be the person who's making change in the world around you. And these women, they grew up in very different environments. Some were affluent, others were not. Carolyn Cochran experienced homelessness as a child. They lived in totally different parts of the country. So leadership doesn't have to come from one specific background. So for me, the main learning from that project was that I think we see people rise up to leadership roles where there is something about them where they believe they have the agency or the ability to make change. And we need to foster more of that, in our society and in our world generally. A lot of people have more power than they think that they do, and they have more ability to make change around them than they think that they do. And sometimes barriers are in their way and those need to be removed. But I want to live in a world and in a country where more people believe that they can be the drivers of the change that they want to see. And I think when we look at the women who have risen up to our most senior leadership roles, that's the common thread. So for me, that was the big learning, is that, yes, we need to see people in those senior roles, but we also need to be building the kind of world where more kids, more young girls in particular, more racialized young girls, have those opportunities to lead early on, because it can be the starting step on a path that leads them into our most senior positions.
Well, I have a follow-up question, and Jonathan, feel free to take this out if it's too political. How would you, if you're elected, encourage children to take these leadership roles and empower them to do that?
So I think, and this might be a sort of a silly answer, but so I'm a new mom. I have a 9-month-old. And so I've been thinking lots about how do I create the kind of environment around her where, whatever it is that she is interested in or the passions that she has the greatest opportunity to influence them possible. And in both during the podcast, but also during the children's book, part of the research process was talking to kids about the kinds of changes they want to see in the world. And I have yet to meet a kid who, when you ask them and you create an opportunity for them to talk about things that they see around them that they would like to see change, I've yet to meet a kid who can't answer that question. Sometimes it's about the environment. Sometimes, we interviewed a bunch of kids during the No Second Chances project. A lot of them had things at their school that they would like to see change, or things in their neighborhood, or the buses weren't showing up on time and they thought that that was a big problem because they saw the impact that had on their parent in terms of their day and getting to work and so on. I've yet to meet a kid who can't identify something that they think is important to them and that they want to see change. And I think we need to create more opportunities for them to actually be a part of that. So that means listening to them. That means being able to put them in potentially, either connecting them with someone who's in a decision-making role, or maybe empowering them in some cases to be a part of those groups that are making decisions. But I think reaching out to people much younger and asking them about what they want to see in the world around them, and then providing or supporting them with opportunities to do that, is really important. So this children's book, it's written with lots of questions along the way that's intended to spark those sorts of discussions between family members or teachers or librarians and children about what matters to them. And it's not just for girls, for any child who can imagine a change that they'd like to see in the world around them. It's intended to spark those questions and those answers, and hopefully the beginning of paths for kids to have a greater impact in the world that we live in.
Well, I'm super excited to read your book and hopefully share it in person with my cousins once lockdown restrictions are lifted. I'm sure they have quite a few ideas on things they'd like to change right now. The one wants to be a construction worker, and I think on it's changing on a daily basis what world problems they'd like to solve, but it's all that matters. It's that it's there and they're excited to do it and they want to be a part of the change. Even when homeschooling gets them down, and there's always that at the end of the day. So I'm going to go into a round of rapid fire questions about that may interest you. First, I was wondering who inspires you and motivates you?
It's so many people. Again, mostly because I'm in the headspace of this children's book. There are a lot of kids who have a great clarity about what they'd like to see change. There's a little girl in my neighborhood, and she is very, very concerned about the lack of clean water in Indigenous communities. She's written letters. She has done school projects about it. She is growing up to be an absolute change maker. And the fact that she has that passion so young in her life is amazing to me. So every time I meet someone, especially someone who is very young and has that kind of clarity, I find it enormously inspiring.
And as a child, what did you want to do when you grew up?
I wanted to be an art teacher. My parents were both teachers. I've always loved art. I love art as a way of expressing ideas. And I had some great teachers myself, my art teachers, who encouraged me to express ideas that way. My first degree was in visual art. And so until I took a job working at City Hall and ended up going a different route, my plan was to be an art teacher.
Oh, that's fabulous. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
What type of art did you like to practice most, I guess?
Drawing and painting. I did a lot during my university degree. I did a lot of soft sculpture, which is basically sewing extremely large things.
Oh,
So yeah, I can share lots more with you about that if you'd like, but yeah, mostly drawing and painting.
awesome. And what is your favorite book?
Again, a hard question. I've been reading lots of kids' books lately. Again, you're getting a sense of the space that I'm in, both as a new mom and working on a kid's book. So my favorite children's book that I've come across so far is a book called I Am Human. And it's a book about teaching compassion to kids. I think it's beautifully written, it's beautifully illustrated, and it's my absolute favorite to read to my daughter these days. And then in terms of an adult book, probably the most influential book for me is Dolls Who Governs. I read it as an undergraduate student for the first time and have gone back to it many, many times since. It presents a model of democracy where we understand that power is unevenly distributed in this world and what it can look like when communities and leaders work together to govern through sort of a community power model. So Doll Who Governs is probably, I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite book, but it's been the most influential book for me, or one of the most influential books.
Well, I'll have to add it to my list then.
Mhm.
And who is your favorite elected official?
Jacinda Ardern. Yeah, and I've been a big fan of Jacinda way before the whole world knew about Jacinda, especially over the last year during COVID, as they've done so well. But
Mhm.
she has a really remarkable life story again, where she started very young. She worked at a soup kitchen in New York as a teenager. She was very involved in global political organizations as a young person, and then her rise through politics, and now the way that she leads, after the horrific shootings,
Mhm.
donning a scarf and going and crying with the women who had just lost their partners, and then the next day introducing gun control so decisively in that order, empathy and then action. To me, she's the kind of leader that we need more of in this world.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that she took action so fast. Everybody always talks about red tape and the barriers that are in place that you can't make change. But in New Zealand, they made it possible. So, uh, yeah. Do you have anything else you would like to add or share with us today?
Um, no, I would just, so as a someone who cares a lot about politics, as I know, I think, both of us and probably anyone tuning into this are in that category. I have now gone through 2 campaigns and I haven't won either. But I would say I have gained more in both than I would have ever expected. I have learned a ton about myself and my community. I'm now very involved in the rebuilding of the Ontario Liberal Party. I'm the vice chair of our campaign. I'm the co-chair of our platform. I'm running again in 2022. But my understanding about the kind of change that I want to see in politics and the things that I believe are needed right now has it's been an education like no other to be a candidate and to be a part of these campaigns, even though I didn't win at the end. So I say this as sort of a closing comment because I think we sometimes have a really shallow understanding about campaigns and people stepping up to run, that it's all about win or lose. And I think we really need to break ourselves out of that these, campaigns and elections are really important opportunities for us to come together as a people about the kind of society that we want to build. And the impact of doing that well is way bigger than who ends up sitting in the seat. That's important. It determines who gets to make decisions, but we need the kind of politics that people want to be a part of, where more people feel like they have the ability to actually meaningfully influence the things that they care about. And politics is a vehicle for doing that. So if anyone watching this is thinking about running or thinking about joining a campaign or getting involved, and the calculation in your mind is very simplistic about, what do the odds look like and so on, I would really encourage you to just go back to, what do you care about and what is the change you want to see in this world? And if it is something that comes down to political will, which most things that matter do, then if you feel that, it is time to get involved. It is time to run or join a campaign or show up for a candidate or donate to a candidate or do something, because the changes that you want to see are not going to happen on their own. They only happen when people step up. So as a closing comment, I would just say, anybody who's watching this, if you are feeling that there's something you want to see change around you, it's time for you to get more involved.
Well, you've certainly given us some major food for thought there. And I think we all have a lot of thinking to do.
All right. Well, thanks for the chance to come on and talk, and congrats again on your role. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do with it and where you go from here too.